What is going on, everybody? You're listening to Expanded Perspectives. My name is Cam Hale. As always, sitting right here beside me, the maestro of what we're trying to figure out is the soundboard, Mr. Kyle Filson.
Yep, trying to figure it out.
This thing, it's giving us fits today. We hope everybody's doing great out there listening. We are recording this on the 46th anniversary of the Patterson-Gimlin films. We're kind of stoked about that.
That's right.
Because it just so happens to fall perfectly in alignment with our guest that we're going to be bringing you, our interview with Mr. Gary Christensen.
That's right, Mr. Gary Christensen of the BFRO is on tonight.
It is going to be some good times. It just worked out perfect that way. How that happened, I don't know. We just got lucky.
Yeah.
First and foremost, I just want to take the time to say, hey, we are sorry. We didn't realize we had such a problem with the last show and the sound quality and the audio.
Yeah, I totally screwed it up. It's completely my fault. I take full responsibility. The shows have been coming out sounding pretty good, and I got a big head. We got a big mixer here with all kinds of buttons and knobs on it. And
it's still giving us fits. It's still right now we're having trouble with it. We're just messing with it.
And I thought, I could make it better, and so I turned some knobs and pressed some buttons, and it came out really bad, and the quality wasn't very good. But the thing is you can record at a certain level, and you can always render it at a much lower level. Mm-hmm. But when you record it at a certain level, you can never make it any better quality than what you recorded at. That's right. So
like
I recorded it at a lower level, trying to make the file size smaller, the audio files, and it came out lousy. So it's just a balance. That's the thing. I mean, the better the quality of the audio, the larger the file size is going to be. So it's really just trying to find that balance.
It's like the old joke: you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. And we pretty much recorded a sow's ear.
Yeah, it wasn't right.
We got an email from Mr. James Corbett. James, thanks for sending us one. He was just giving us a heads up about how bad the quality was. We're like, man, I'm sorry. We screwed it up. We know. Everybody out there, we apologize. We're working on this. Hey, it's a work in progress, man. We're trying to get this thing going good, and sometimes we stumble and fall. Well, we stumble and fall a lot because we're idiots, but we're really trying hard.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it will never happen again. I'm sure sometime down the line there'll be a mistake or two made, but I think we got the problem corrected, and I'm going to just quit messing with stuff that I shouldn't be touching. So
well, we don't have to really. We got to work more, I guess, and it's one of those things. It's hard to learn. I guess if any of the listeners out there, any kind of wild engineer, want to send us some emails or some links to something that might give some good advice, we'd be happy to take it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I didn't go to broadcasting school or never was a radio host.
That's not what you told me when we first started all this. You told me that you had done all that.
No.
Oh, you didn't?
No, I never told you that.
You dirty liar. You dirty liar. Hey, I got a couple of shout-outs I want to throw out to some people that have been following and listening to us. We've had a follower ever since the Mike Mays interview, and I've totally forgot him. His name's Sean Prather. Sean, I am very sorry. He doesn't even know this is coming. We've talked on Twitter and things like that. We've also got a follower, Chris Coleman. Chris on Twitter. He's a good guy, too. And we made some new podcasting friends over this past week. Folks, if you haven't heard of the podcast Into the Dark Radio, you really need to check this out.
I listen to tons of different podcasts, and I have over a length of time. And, as far as the paranormal podcast, theirs is one of my favorites.
Yeah, I do. I really enjoy it. It's one of those ones that it kind of came up by accident on Twitter. Somebody sent one. I saw this. I went to it, and then you had told me about it. We went to checking it out.
Yeah, I've listened to it before.
Steve Rogers and Sean McMahon.
Yep.
And they're a great bunch of guys. And in fact, we hope to kind of get them on, and we're going to do a little roundtable thing with them, I think.
I think they're going to come on the show soon, and vice versa. I think we might be on their show.
I sure hope so.
So that would be really cool. Because we haven't really done anything on paranormal yet. I mean, as far as a ghost and things. Of course, we've done paranormal things, but nothing focused on.
Well,
ghosts.
they actually do ghost hunting and things like that too.
Yeah.
So I would like to. That's kind of like a whole nother thing that I've really not been involved in. It's something else I can learn and research about. So that'd be fun to kind of get involved with.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank people for following me personally on Twitter and for the show. It looks like we're gaining numbers. More people are following us on Facebook as well as Twitter and stuff. And you can follow the show at Expanded P.
At Expanded P
is the show's Twitter. You can follow Cam at Cam Hale at EXP.
Yep, Cam Hale EXP.
And it's me. It's Kyle Filson at EXP. You can go to our website, expandedperspectives.com. I got a poll up there. I'd like everybody to go there and vote. It's just a real simple thing. It's like wanting to know what people want to listen to. UFOs, ghost and hauntings, conspiracy theories, ancient history, cryptozoology. And when you vote, it'll kind of show you what the other people have been voting. And that'll just give us some feedback on what kind of stuff people really like to see instead of just what me and Cam want to put out.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, there's certain books I like and Cam likes and people may not like at all or vice versa. Cam's, he's been trying to get me to read this fiction book by Graham Hancock. And I love Graham Hancock. I'm just not much of a fiction reader,
Yeah.
So, we'd like to see some feedback and that'll kind of help us with booking new guests.
That's true. Yeah, let us know. Here. And also, too, you can email us at expandedperspectives@yahoo.com.
That's right.
If you have if you want to be on the show, you got anything interesting, people that you'd like to hear on the show, shoot us an email. Also, too, with it getting to be this type of year, hey, guys, we have got an Amazon banner on our website that if you want to do any Amazon shopping.
If you're doing some Christmas shopping.
Exactly.
If you want to help out the show.
Jump through there. It'll take you right to Amazon, and we get a small, very, very small percentage of what everybody, so it's kind of like you're doing your own contributing to it. Doesn't cost you any extra, anything like that. Amazon actually kicks it to us, and we get a few, I don't even know how it is, a tiny percentage of what it is.
Store credits, and we can use it to buy books and stuff for the show.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't actually get a paycheck.
No, we don't get anything from it. But yeah, it would be, if you want to help out or something like that, that'd be awesome. In fact, I do remember that Kyle's stuck that, what am I trying to say? The donate button. If y'all feel like donating, we'd be happy to take it. We're not asking, we're not begging, we're just telling you it's up there. If it so strikes you, please go ahead and do it. But if not, we totally understand because we're going to keep bringing this to you no matter what because we are really enjoying doing this.
Yeah, and Audible's on there as well.
Yeah, Audible's on there.
Some audio books.
That is, you know what? To be 100% honest, I've never tried it. My son has. My son uses it all the time. I've done it
before. Yeah, we took a road trip to Colorado to go snow skiing, and I don't know if it is this way in your family. Usually, I'm the one that does all the driving.
I feel you.
We have young kids, so we usually we try to leave in the evening. So I drive through the night, so everybody's asleep, and when we wake up in the morning, we're there. So it's a long haul.
Yeah,
and that's the first time I listened to an audiobook off Audible is last year when I went skiing.
Yeah, it's
a huge variety. They've got tons of books on there
on all kinds of things. Yeah. I'm going to have to give it a whirl. My son loves it. My son,
that's cool.
He enjoys the heck out of it, so I'm going to have to definitely try it out.
Yeah. Have you seen what's going on in the news this week with the 1.8 million year old skull they found in Georgia?
I saw. Now, first of all, everybody, when we say Georgia, we don't mean in the United States.
No, not Atlanta.
Yeah. No. Yes, I saw that, and it's something that really kind of turns the original scientific view of the human origin kind of on its ear at that point.
Yeah, they said it's like one of the most pristine skeletons found of a Homo erectus. Usually, unless people are purposely buried, they usually don't find them in that good a shape.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course back then, now when we talk about it, we're saying Homo erectus. It's a distant relative of the Homo sapien, but it was believed only to be 1 million years ago that the beginnings of man left out of Africa, and now this skull is found to be 1.8. So they only missed about 800,000 years.
Yeah, that's not that long. Come on, 800,000 years? What's that?
Makes you wonder what else we've missed, because we've covered a lot of things on this show so far that we know they've missed, or what we believe they've missed, and we're going to continue to cover it. So I'm sure that may have opened up a few eyes, too. I know that they've, like I keep talking about Göbekli Tepe, it seems like the dating around there it keeps getting pushed back.
They keep pushing it back further and further all the time. You're 100% right.
Kind of shakes everything up. The Paradigm Symposium should be wrapping up today.
Today should be the last day of it.
Should be the last day of it.
So I'm waiting to see when Micah and some of the guys come home.
Yeah.
If they got any cool stories for us.
I'm sure we'll hear from Micah. We're going to talk to him. Nick, I think Nick's going to come on the show.
That's right, Nick Redfern.
We're going to visit after all that's over.
Ooh, that's right. And our Halloween special that's coming up.
Oh, yeah. Now, we've got a good one for you. If everybody out there loves some stories of some werewolves and some dog men, we have the queen, the lovely Miss Linda Godfrey.
That's right. Yeah, she's coming on, and she's going to be on the Halloween special, which is like Monday the 28th, I think.
Yeah, I think that's when we're going to.
Yeah. So that'll be good. Who else we got coming up? Antonio.
Antonio from Aerial Phenomenon.
That's right. We're going to talk about UFOs and things like that.
I've got this is another one. I've got an email out waiting to hear back from Paul. Paul with the Indava bird. We're going to talk to him.
Yes, the roping.
Yep, we're going to talk to Paul, get a hold of him. So that'll be some fun stuff. But yeah, I mean, we've got some good interviews going to come up. I think. Now, I've spoken to his wife, and we're going to try to wait till after the first of the year because everybody gets real busy. But we're going to have Dr. Robert Schock, come on and talk about.
Oh, man, I can't wait for that.
Yeah, the mass coronal ejections that he's
There's so
studied.
many questions I have for that guy. Ever since I saw him,
was it 93?
Talking about the water erosion on the Sphinx.
Yeah.
It was a while ago. I didn't know it in 93. I didn't stumble on this information until probably 6 years ago.
Yeah, but that's when they made the documentary, I believe.
Yeah, I don't remember.
It was in 93.
You're talking about the one with like Charlton Heston?
Well, of course. That's Moses.
I love the way Scotty does the impressions of Moses.
Oh man, that was a heck of an interview.
Hey, did you see that article I sent you on the time slips? Now I know you're a time slip, aficionado.
I do love me some time slips. Yes,
man. I just love that kind of stuff, and I stumbled upon a whole blog on time slips, so I'll put that in the show notes as well if I can find that again. But there's a really neat story in there, and some of them are okay, but some of them are pretty cool. This new one I've never read before. A lot of the times on the internet you'll read a time slip story, and it's the same story,
just altered a little bit, like somebody may have taken it.
I've read this one before. I've read this one. This one took place in 1996 in Liverpool, England.
So somewhat extremely recent in compared to some of the older time slips.
And it was a guy named Frank and his wife Carol. And it was a Saturday in July, and they were going to town to do some shopping, and his wife wanted to go into Dylan's bookstore and get a book. And he wanted to get a CD, and they didn't sell them there, so he went around the corner to a little shop to buy a CD. He said he went in there, bought his CD, came out, and he was going to go back and meet his wife Carol at the bookstore.
I got you.
Well, he said when he rounded the corner, he almost got run over. There was a truck going by, and it was like a 1950s truck, and it had the word Kaplan's written on the side of it. Well, he didn't pay much attention to it. He kept walking, and as he was walking, he was like, there's another 1950s-looking car, and there's another one. And then he started looking at the way people were dressed, and they were dressed like 50s, late 40s. And he was just, this is weird, but he just kept going. And as he approached the bookstore, he noticed that the bookstore didn't say Dillon's anymore above it. It said Cripps or something like that on it.
Was this in L.A.?
No, this is not in Compton.
You didn't? Okay.
This is in Liverpool. Sure.
Liverpool. Is there Crips in Liverpool? Is there Bloods?
I don't think so.
You ever been to Liverpool?
No, I have
so
not.
You're talking out your ass. Go ahead with your story. It's
Anyways,
all right. I'm sorry.
And as he approached it, it had a different sign above it. And then as he got closer, he noticed that it had women's handbags and like shoes in it, not a bookstore at all. So, he's like, what the heck? This doesn't look right. He just kept walking.
That's the kind of bookstore you shop in.
Well,
It's got women's handbags in it.
He was following like a girl like in her 20s, and she was dressed in older style clothes as well. And he was right behind her. She opened the door, walked in. He walked in right behind her. They started to look around, and boom, he said he saw a big white flash. And it was the bookstore again. And he looked, and he saw that girl. So he said he grabbed the girl by her arm and said, hey, did you see that? And she said, yeah, I saw that. I thought this was a handbag and shoe store. Now it's a bookstore. I don't know what happened. And she walked out. Now, how do you explain that?
Oh, wow.
I love those stories. It's like for a minute they were back. I don't know if they were back.
His wife was already in the store, right?
Yeah, she was there. She didn't know what he was talking about.
So nothing changed to her. She's just in there going.
She did not.
It was just everything happened right around her.
Yeah. Do you remember that one? You told me a time slip story a couple of years ago that you read somewhere. It took place like in France or something.
With a married couple?
Yeah, newlywed couple. Yeah, tell me that.
Okay. What ended up happening was a couple that I'll do my best by memory. I'm sorry I don't have it right here in front of me, but let me think right quick. Okay, this couple was married over in France.
Right.
And they were going on their honeymoon. And they had a nice little quaint place picked out that they were going to go stay on, like a seaside area. And they drove a good ways. And of course, this was recent too. Like I'm going to say this was within the last 10 years this happened. And they drove for a good while, and to get to where they were going on this little seaside village area they planned on staying. They already had their hotel booked and everything, and they got there relatively early in the morning, say around 2 or 3, as the story goes, and they found them a place to park, and they said it was noticeably dark, like not a lot of street lights, not anything busy, like the town seemed extremely dead for the time that they were there. So they, pulled up and hopped out, and they got their stuff, and they made their way around to where their hotel was alleged to be. And it was a big, like, old door, and it was, they kind of like an old rundown hotel. And the man that was telling the story, the husband, he said he pushed the door open and walked in, and it was dirty and kind of dank in there. And there was an old man behind the counter, and they said that they had they'd booked a room, and they wanted to come in and stay. And the old man didn't really almost speak the same language, although they were in the same area. But the man pointed to the logbook, and the couple had filled out the logbook, said it was dusty and kind of dank as an old book. And the old man rang a bell, and this little girl come down, sat around 12 or 14 years old, dressed in the era of, 1700s or so, and come down and got their things and took off with it or so. And they followed her down this hall to take to this room, and they said that she was having a hard time carrying the bags. So the husband, of course, took the bags from her and followed her, and she had the little lamp, with the little oil lamp, and followed them in there. And she opened the door to their bedroom and said it was filthy. It was like cobwebs and dust and everything and grime. And they said, look, we're not staying here for our honeymoon. We're not doing it.
Yeah.
So they turned around and left, and they left, and the old man wasn't behind the counter anymore and all that, and they kind of slipped out of there and went back to their car. And they said, look, it's a few hours till daylight. This isn't what we thought it was going to be. Let's just crash in the car. Come daylight, we'll hop up and find us a new place to stay. It's a hell of a way to spend the honeymoon evening, but that's what we'll do. So they slept in the car there along the beach or wherever they'd parked, and said when they woke up the next morning right there at daylight, they got out, and they said that there was cars all around them. They were traffic lights. I mean, it was like they were back into town, and these things weren't there when they got there. So they look around, and they get their stuff out, and they walk around the corner back to this hotel, and it's the big fancy hotel. And they got there and walked in, and they said, oh, we expected you last night.
The old man's not there?
No, it's current. And they said, we expected you last night. And they said, well, we came here. What was going on? This is what they saw. Where's the old hotel we saw? And they're like, sir, this hotel's been here for almost 200 years.
Wow. So we don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, they said, looked at them like they were crazy. So yeah, that's a pretty wild story.
Man, that's neat. Yeah, I love those stories.
I don't know what could possibly cause it. I have no clue.
I've heard of people driving down the road, and all of a sudden they'll see a dinosaur out in a field or something.
Like Sedona, Arizona was known for those kind of things.
Really?
There's a lot of stories up around Sedona, almost like there's a vortex.
I'm going to do some research and do that on an upcoming show.
Of like some
more
time
stories
slips.
about time slips. Yeah.
I found a website, and folks, yet again, it's one of those things. I find so much stuff when I'm researching other things that I forget to write.
To one thing,
I forget to write it down, and I blast over to another one and skip over to another one. But it was like spotting time travelers or out of place people in old photos, and they had photos, and they would blow it up, and they'd be like a person that was totally out of place. And it was, I'll have to find it again so I can tell you the name of it. But anyway, it was a fascinating deal.
Wow.
I tell you, folks, we are extremely thankful that everybody's listening and enjoying. I got a favor to ask. Can you go to iTunes and write a review, please, if you get it from iTunes? If you get it from Apple, wherever you download this from, can you please write a review for us? It really helps us out. It makes it look better on iTunes. It makes it look where other people can find us easily. And, man, we would be forever grateful because...
Hey, we got a new one up.
Oh, do we?
Yep. I just saw one somebody just posted.
Who we got?
The name was Flipper6767. So thank you, whoever you are.
Yes, thanks.
They put kind words on there, and I'm glad that they're enjoying the show.
Yeah, look, folks, if you enjoy it or you don't.
Yeah, be honest.
Kind words or not, just be honest. Go ahead and post it up. We're thick-skinned. We'll take it.
And I have to apologize to the city of St. Louis. I by no means have anything against anyone in St. Louis. And there was a guy from St. Louis, Tyson Chambers. He kind of busted my chops a little bit about not liking the Cardinals and stuff. But he seemed like a really good sport about it, and he's pretty cool. And he seems like a really nice fella. And we'll probably have him play a little fantasy hockey if we ever even get that going.
Yeah, he's a Cardinals nation. They're going to the World Series to take on Boston.
Tigers are done.
Yeah, so I'm going to root for Boston. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm definitely not, I can't root for the Cardinals. I can't bring myself.
I can't do it.
I can't bring myself.
I can't do it. Look, St. Louis is a beautiful town, and great people, and I'm just. It's one of those things. You know how sports lines are drawn and blow. I can't do it, man. I just can't. Because I'm a Rangers fan, and they always have a hell of a time with the Cardinals too. So I'm not going to deal with it.
Yeah, that was pretty ugly in the World Series.
You think? They're a good team though. My God, they're a good team.
Oh yeah, no, there's no doubt. There's no doubt.
And my hat's off right quick. My hat's off to Mr. Cain Velasquez. defending his title last night against Junior Dos Santos in the UFC Heavyweight Championship. Putting Junior away in the 5th round was really something. That was a battle. Folks, if you haven't seen that, last night was a great fight between that one and between Gilbert Melendez and Diego Sanchez. Ooh, man, those two guys are animals.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to watch it.
Great. It was a night of amazing fights. It really was. It was great.
Yeah.
And congratulations to Justin Rader, Oklahoma City boy, and Rafael Lovato Jr., 2 Oklahoma City boys that are both amazing black belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They went over and competed at the ADCC, the Abu Dhabi Combat Club, over in Beijing, China. And Rafael got the silver medal in his weight division, and Justin got the bronze in his weight division. So congratulations, guys. We're pulling for some good Americans over there.
Yeah. Well, let's get into tonight's interview. Gary Christensen of the BFRO.
Ooh, yeah, it's great.
He's a really cool fella. You know, and we are the first people to ever interview him on a podcast.
Yeah, we got lucky. That was Gary.
So it's kind of like an untapped resource.
He's
really.
A great guy.
He got some really cool stories. I even loved the story that he tells us about the hoax. You know?
That is an amazing story. Yeah, that's a great one. Gary was such a good guy.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. And he knows Matt Moneymaker and all those guys, and he's been Bigfoot researching for how long?
Like 50 years?
50 years, so he's got a lot of knowledge on the topic, and he's a pretty cool. So I hope you guys enjoy the story. I can't talk.
Yeah, we enjoyed talking to him, and the great thing about it is Gary agreed to come back on whenever. Yeah. So he's like a treasure trove of untapped stories of years and years of doing this. So we are going to have some really good stories to come from him too.
Yeah, all right. Well, let's get into it. Thanks, everybody, and we'll talk to you later. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is Kyle Filson with Expanded Perspectives, and with me, as always, is my partner, Cam Hale.
What's going on, everybody?
And tonight, we got a really special guest. His name is Gary Christensen, and he's a researcher for the BFRO, which is also known as the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization. You might be familiar with their show on the Discovery Channel and Animal Planet, Finding Bigfoot, that has some of the researchers from this organization. And Gary is based out of Texas, here in the Metroplex, and he's going to share some stories with us, and we'll see what he's got. How you doing out there, Gary?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
We're doing good. The fall weather is starting to not be so hot, and it's really been enjoyable, in the evenings. I really like this time of year.
Yeah, me too.
Gary, could you briefly tell our audience who you are and what got you interested in this and some of the things you do?
Yes, I've been interested in this phenomenon since the 1950s. I'm an old guy. And back in the 50s, I can remember reading some newspaper accounts of people that were working on logging roads in Northern California, and they were coming across these very large tracks in the mud, and they couldn't figure out what they were. They looked like human tracks, but they were way too big to be human tracks. And then reading further in some of these newspaper accounts, I found that they had some problems with their various equipment at the logging sites. Some of the 55-gallon fuel drums were picked up and thrown over cliffs, and they weren't rolled, and they couldn't figure out how that could happen without some kind of large machinery doing it.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible.
So anyway, that got me interested, and then I started reading all the other articles that I could find in magazines and so forth, and I can remember when the Patterson-Gimlin film came out of the female Sasquatch walking across in the camera in Northern California, and how intriguing that was. And I can remember buying the Argosy magazine that had stills from that movie film, and I still have that magazine to this day.
Wow.
So anyway, that kind of got me hooked, and then it took me a long time. I put in 23 years in the Air Force and was traveling all over the world, and then I spent another 18 years with American Airlines, and finally I retired from both of those and had time to have an outlet for my interest in Bigfoot, and I found an organization that I was impressed with, and my investigating kind of goes from there.
Hey, Gary, this is Cam. I'm one of the other hosts on the show.
Hey, Cam.
Hey, I wanted a quick question. Do you just mainly cover the Texas area, or where all do they have you covering?
What we do is we get reports that are sent in to the BFRO, and they're posted by state, and investigators can look on that in that protected area and find reports that look interesting to them and investigate those. Since I happen to be in Texas, we have about 4 or 5 other investigators in the state around different places. There are about 4 in the Metroplex, another one down in the San Antonio area, and one other one, and I'm not sure where he lives at this point. But anyway, since I'm over on the west side of the Metroplex, I just kind of told the other investigators that I would investigate anything that occurs west of Fort Worth, and so that's kind of been my area. Another area that I've done some investigating in is North Dakota, and that's because I have relatives up there. And when I get back in the summertime, I go up there fishing, or next week I'm going up for pheasant season. If I have the time when I'm up there and there are any reports that look interesting, I'll investigate those. So I've done a few up in North Dakota also, and some of those have been my most interesting.
I see. I wondered how that worked, if it was like singles or if there were several other people that would help out. Did you ever have, or have you ever had a sighting yourself or an encounter with anything like that?
No, I have never had a daylight sighting. I've had some other things happen that I could not explain away as being anything other than a Bigfoot doing those things. So that's kind of been my experience. I think it all started on my second expedition that I did with the BFRO up in Oklahoma. I was up there south of a town that is pronounced by the locals Hanabi, but it looks like Hanobia. And that town is got a reputation for many, many, many Bigfoot sightings. In fact, they call themselves Bigfootville.
I remember seeing that.
Town.
I remember seeing that on television. They did a special on that.
They did, and I saw that special also. I was out with the BFRO. A large group of us went into the hills south of Honaby, and we were going to spread ourselves out in teams of 3 across about a mile of road off the main highway, and we were going to set up and then listen, and we had some different high-tech equipment. We had some thermal imaging equipment, and we had some recording devices and that, and we were out there spreading ourselves out to see what we could hear and see at night. So we go out there, and it's just about dark, and I'm in the second group that they're dropping off along the road, along with 2 other people. And just as we get out of the vehicle, we hear this unbelievably powerful howl that comes from the hills, probably, I would estimate, 300 or 400 yards away, but it was very powerful, very deep, and then it went into a high scream, and it's like nothing else I've ever heard. I've heard coyotes, and I've heard wolves, and heard a lot of different animals, but nothing sounded like this. And one of the experienced people was there and said that for all of you who haven't heard a Bigfoot howl, you've just heard your first one.
Wow.
So that was kind of the start. Another time, I was on another expedition east of Honolulu, and it was daytime, and I had one of the rookies that was camped by a little stream, and he was over there during the daytime when we were kind of resting up to do our night expeditions, and he said, I've been over there fishing, and he says, there are a lot of fish in that little stream, and he says, I'll catch one, and he says, I'll throw it back in the water, and when I throw it back in the water, a rock hits in the water next to me. Well, on the other side of this stream from where he was camped was jungle, and it was pretty impenetrable, and there was nobody over on that side of the river. And even if you got over there, getting through that stuff would have been a real challenge. So he said that happened to him 2 or 3 times. Every time he'd catch a fish, he says, I'd throw back, and a rock would splash in the water next to me. And he said, I looked all around, and there wasn't anybody around throwing rocks. He says, I don't know where it came from. But it was certainly a rock or something that sunk right away. It wasn't something that was floating on the surface. So he says after that happened a couple of times, he says, I caught the next fish, and I kind of peeked out from behind my sunglasses, and he says, I looked across the creek to see if when I threw this fish back, I could see an arm coming up or somebody throwing a rock. And he says, I'm looking up there, and I throw the fish back, and nothing happens. And so he says he waits for a little bit, and nothing has happened. So he says, well, it must have been, something else. I don't know what it was. And he says the first time his eyes went away from the other side of the creek there, he says, I just looked away for an instant, and splash, a rock hits in the water next to me.
Bigfoot's not down with catch and release then.
Yeah. So anyway, I went over there later on in that day in the later afternoon, and went over and started fishing, and I caught a few fish, and nothing was happening, and so I continued to fish, and caught another fish a little later on, and threw it back in, and splash, this rock hits in the water next to me. And I look all around, and there's nobody around. There was nobody in sight of where I was. Wow. And it was pretty open, except for the other side of the river where the jungle was. So anyway, that was an experience I don't have an explanation for.
Yeah, I don't guess there isn't. The only explanation is it had to be a Sasquatch.
Yeah, that's insane.
But
yeah, so I don't know what it was.
I know when everybody... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, it could have been a person, but a person being over there, why would they be over there, and why would they do that? It made no sense to me. They would have had to fight their way through all that jungle just to get into position to do that.
Yeah.
And I don't see most people being stealthy enough to be able to do that.
I know most people always they associate Bigfoot with, like we were talking about earlier, I love like Northern California or even the East Texas and all that. But you were talking about North Dakota?
North Dakota. Probably my one of the more interesting investigations that I did was a report that was at least 5 years old when I picked it up. And I was going up to North Dakota for the summer, and I had some time to do some investigations. So I picked this one from a little town next to the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation. And it seemed like it was fairly interesting, and there were 2 or 3 reports about the same incident. So apparently they didn't get any response from the BFRO, so they submitted another report, but they were all about 5 years old. So I tried the phone number of the individual that submitted the report, and then that was not a working number. And then I tried the email that they'd used to submit the report, and that was not a working email. So I thought, well, I'll just go over this town and see if I can find this person. So I went over there, and it was a very small town. They had a school, and they had a clinic, and they had a Quick Trip gas station and convenience store. So I thought, well, if you're going to find anybody in these little towns, everybody has to go to the convenience store. So I go in, and there's a Native American woman that's working there, and I said, well, do you happen to know this person? And I give him the name, and she says, oh, yeah, I know him. I said, well, I'm trying to find him. You know, down here, nobody would tell you how to find anybody. But she says, oh, well, he could be two places. He's either at his parents' house or he's at his friend's house. And he drives a two-tone old Suburban. And you'll know that he's there if you see that car. So anyway, and she says, I'll draw you a map. So she draws me a map in this town to find this place. So I go out and go to the first place, a friend's house, and he's not there. So I go over to the parents' house, and sure enough, there's an old two-tone Suburban there. So I go up and to knock on the door, and this large Native American guy comes to the door, and he says, what do you want? And he's looking at me like, you know, what are you doing in this town? I've never seen you before. Yeah. So anyway, I said, well, I'm looking for this guy. And gives him the name, and he says, well, he's not here. And I says, okay, well, let me introduce myself. I says, my name is Gary Christensen, and I'm with the BFRO. And he says, BFRO? We've been waiting for you. Come on in.
That changed everything.
Yeah. So he invites me in, and he says, he yells for his son to come up from downstairs, and introduces me to his son and his wife, and they're just so hospitable. They want to know if they can get me something to eat or drink, and then the son, who's probably at that time he was in his early 20s, I would say. He says, "Well, come on downstairs," and we go down there. He's got a whole database of sightings right around that town that occurred over a number of years.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
So anyway,
I take it you spent some time there then.
Oh yeah. Well, he had a lot of information. I mean, he had names, dates, type of activity. He had a map that had everything plotted on it, where these events occurred. There were daylight sightings. There were nighttime howls that they heard. They had an area on the map where they found footprints. It was just incredible. So anyway, I told him, well, you're my eyes and ears in North Dakota. So I made him an honorary member of the BFRO, and we've corresponded over the years, and I usually send him a Christmas card, and he sends me information and invited me up another time to meet another witness for another event. But his event, it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and his cousin, two cousins, female cousins, were coming back from Minot, North Dakota, to their little town. And just on the outskirts of town, they saw a Bigfoot just standing next to the road. And it just shocked them. They went and woke up my guy, and they went out in the vehicle and went where they thought the Bigfoot might be. And this is all, this is not forest. This is cut wheat fields, some little water holes, a few cottonwood trees in various places, but it's pretty open country, very open.
So unlike most sightings, they actually went back to look for him, but because a lot of people, they'll sight him and they just leave. They don't want no part of it. These actually went back to look for him, and it's just wide open. It's just like prairie land.
Yeah, it was.
Wow.
Well, anyway, they went to where they thought he was going to be, which was about, I'd say, 3 miles from town. And they had a couple of high-powered spotlights, and they spotlighted him in the field.
Oh, they found him.
They found him.
Wow.
And when they hit him with a spotlight, he sat down, and he was about 100 yards from them.
You know, I've heard of them doing that before. I don't remember if I saw it on a TV show or I read it, but I saw that sometimes when they're spooked, they'll try to, like, make themselves look like a stump or just play like possum, I guess. I don't know. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, but he just sat down. They had him spotlighted, and the ladies that made the original sighting, they were in the back seat, and they were freaking out. Boy, they were.
I can imagine.
Let's get out of here. You look at the size of that thing, you know. They were scared to death. So anyway, they spotlight him, and then all of a sudden he stands up, and they see how big he was, and then he takes a couple steps toward the car, and that was all it took. They got out of there.
Yeah.
And then they reported it to the Native American Police Department and the State Game and Fish. And they came out, looked for evidence. They did find some kind of suspect tracks out in this cut wheat field, but that was just kind of the beginning. And then for about the next 3 or 4 months, there were people all around the little town that either had sightings or heard things. A couple people that lived on the outskirts of town saw one shuffle across an open field in the wintertime. But there was a lot of activity that went on up there.
Gary, in your experience, does it seem that the Native American culture is a little more open to the idea of a Sasquatch than our culture?
Well, just my experience with him in North Dakota, I would say yes. I think in a lot of cases, elders in the various tribes. In fact, it's not just Native Americans. It's people who live in rural areas. They have these experiences, and they're not usually willing to share them with people that they don't trust. And the locals know about these things, but they're not. They don't want anybody calling them fools or idiots or whatever. So they usually keep these things to themselves, and they might speak among themselves, but normally they don't share with a lot of other people. And that's in the Native American culture and in just rural America, especially here in Texas.
I knew that you bring that up. I knew a guy that actually had a sighting, and that was the same thing as he only told a handful of people, and then he never really spoke of it again. I mean, just wouldn't. He never really related to anybody. That was it. That's the whole deal. It kind of shook him up, and then he never really spoke of it again. And it's like he just didn't want. I guess he didn't want the stigma that he felt came with that.
Right.
I guess the most of the people that do report to you, Gary, they don't want the information leaked out who they are. Most of them are trying to stay clandestine. Is that correct?
There are several that are like that, and if they tell me they don't want their sighting put on our website, we don't. And I just put a note on it, not for publication.
I got you.
But we never put people's names on the reports.
Right, okay.
And a lot of times we'll mention the location very generally, so it doesn't, we're not going to say, well, this is on Joe Smith's ranch where this occurred. We don't put that kind of information on there. We basically say it's near such and such a town, but there's not any specifics, so that we don't want our witnesses besieged by a bunch of usually city folks who are interested in seeing if they can go find Bigfoot on the weekend.
Well, we all get the stories, and we hear all the stories of like everybody uses the term blob squatch, where they just catch a glimpse of it, or they thought they saw something moving through the woods and things like that. Have you got any stories that you could share with us that are full-on sightings, like maybe somebody actually watched the creature, maybe the creature didn't know that they were being watched, or I mean, even some wild. I mean, we had a Mike Mays on from the NAWAC, and he gave us a couple of really wild stories that most people have never heard outside of what they see on television. Have you ever taken any stories from people that are like, it's almost if you hadn't done it yourself, it would almost be hard for you to believe if you had just heard it?
I have a family near the town of Ennis, Texas. And,
Okay.
that's pretty doggone close.
Yes, sir.
And they live within a few hundred yards of I-45. And it's what we call a habituation site. This person and this family has been visited over the years, starting when the gentleman was in his teens, and has continued to this day, and he's probably in his 40s now. He habituated, we believe, a Bigfoot and the Bigfoot's family by feeding it over the years, and it kept coming back. Sometime it'd leave him alone for a long time, and then it'd come by to check what was going on, and he would notice that it's there, and he might put out food or he might not. When I first met him, he had some kind of signs of paranoia and almost like PTSD that soldiers get, because he'd been terrified a few times in his life, and he really didn't know what to do about the experiences that he had. So we talked about him for a long period of time, and now we've become pretty good friends. And he calls me every now and then and lets me know if anything is going on, and he's more than willing to tell me, now nothing's happened in the past 6 months. I haven't seen or heard anything. Or when something occurs, he might call me and say, just last night this happened. His wife was not a believer, and she thought that he was kind of crazy. And until she had her daylight sighting, and that was a very interesting one. That was probably almost as good as anything that her husband had. She told me that she was home alone about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, beautiful sunny skies outside, and she lives in a small house just off of the freeway, as I said. They have a dog that's chained up outside, and the dog is totally passive. He does not bark when strangers come or anything. He just basically will probably go in his doghouse if somebody shows up that he doesn't know. But anyway, and they have a kind of a privacy fence on one side of the house so that people from outside can't really see into their yard. But anyway, she's watching TV, and she has a big, kind of a large window that faces to the east. And it was, like I say, nice weather, sun shining. She's watching TV, and it's a comedy, and she's kind of laughing, and all of a sudden it kind of gets dark in the room, and she thought, oh, it's clear outside. I don't wonder why it's dark. And so she looks up at the window, and there it was, looking in at her. Middle of the afternoon. We went and did some measurements out there, and it was probably at least 8 feet tall and almost as wide as her window was.
Wow.
And she described it in detail. I mean, she said it was like it had black eyes with yellow irises. The hair had a kind of a reddish tinge on the ends of the hair, but it was darker on the base of the hair shaft, that it had patches of gray on it. I mean, she described the thing in detail.
Wow, that's
and
incredible.
She said when she saw it, she looked at it, couldn't hardly believe her eyes, and screamed. And when she screamed, it took a step backwards and pounded its chest, and then walked off to the south of their house, back behind the house and down a tree line.
Wow.
And she couldn't see it once it left the window. And she wasn't about to go outside.
Yeah, I don't blame her. I don't blame her one bit.
Yeah, but she had a very close daylight sighting. And so she's now a believer, and
yeah, I'm sure.
they have two later teenage sons, and both of them have had some experience also.
Wow.
So there's a lot of stuff that goes on at that house. And that witness, you could say, well, he's making that up, but usually an entire family doesn't make stuff up like he's told me, and he has so much detail that I believe that he is sincere about what he's telling me.
Yeah. Well, you've interviewed enough people. So.
The best witness that I've had.
Wow. Well, that's what I was going to say. You've interviewed enough people. You probably can sniff out people that are making up a story. In fact, that brings me to my next question. I'm sure you do. Do you ever get some like really crazy people that are just, you can tell are obviously just making this stuff up?
Yeah, and usually the way I find that when I try and contact them, they'll tell me a story that doesn't jive at all. I had one from North Dakota, and they were talking about the deep woods of North Dakota, just south of Bismarck, and I know that area, and there's no deep woods there. and they'll describe things like that I know that it's a hoax from the beginning.
Yeah.
One of the hoaxes that I investigated was probably one of the better investigations that I've done. I told Matt Moneymaker, the head of the BFRO, about it, and we don't publish hoaxes, but when he heard this story, he says, that's probably one we should have posted. and it's kind of interesting. It will only take me probably about 5 minutes.
No, please go ahead and tell it. Yeah, I'm intrigued. Yeah, let us have it.
Okay, well, this occurred, I got a report from a Native American that lives kind of just a little bit south of Bismarck, and his report was from when he was in an Indian school in Chamberlain, South Dakota. He was 6 years old, and his sister was 7. He said we were on the playground in the evening after our dinner, and we were out there playing, and there were probably 40 to 50 kids and teachers out there. And we saw this big shaggy thing coming from the Missouri River bottoms, and it came out and came up toward the school, and we were all very frightened, and we told the teachers, and they told us that we needed to go back inside, but he said some of us stayed out there to see what would happen, and he said it came up to the school up on this high bank and screamed at the kids and picked up a tree and threw it down onto the playground. And he described that it came down and hit the swing set that was down below it. And so I thought, well, that's interesting. That's not really Bigfoot activity. They don't usually do those kind of things, but I'll investigate it further. Well, I went to speak with him, and I also contacted the school. And when I contacted the school, they said, well, nothing occurred. That was just a hoax. So nothing happened. So I was going to investigate a little further, so I went and met with this guy. And he had his sister come over, and his sister said I was on the playground, and she described what she saw, and it was exactly the same thing that he had said he had seen. And they said, well, if you want a couple more witnesses, here's a couple more people that you can contact. Well, I was going to head down to Chamberlain, South Dakota, and go to that school and see what I could find out from down there. So one of the witnesses was in Fort Thompson, South Dakota, and so I stopped there, and once again I go to the Quick Trip and convenience store, and I asked, well, do you know this lady? And they says, oh, yeah, and they told me exactly where her house was, and so I went over and knocked on her door, and she came to the door, and she's once again like, who is this guy? And I explained who I was, and that I had investigated for these other people that lived up in North Dakota, and I asked if she knew them. Oh, yeah, they were classmates of mine. Well, do you remember this incident? And she gives me the same story. The Bigfoot came in, threw this tree down, and another part of the story was kind of interesting, too. Just shortly after that happened, and the Bigfoot was screaming at the kids, the police showed up. And they said that shots were fired, and as they were running back into the building, the cops ran up after the Bigfoot, and there were shots fired. So anyway, I says, well, if shots were fired, I ought to be able to go to the police department, at least in Chamberlain, and find out, what happened at this time. There should be some kind of police report or something on this. And it happened back in like 1979 or something like that, so it was a long time ago. So anyway, I went to the school, and I went to administrative office, and I said, do you have any teachers or faculty that were here in 1979? Oh, yeah, Mrs. So-and-so, she's always here. I says, well, could I speak with her? Well, she's in a meeting, but she'll be out in about an hour, and if you come back, I'm sure she'd love to talk to you. So I go over and go through their Indian museum that they have there that was great. I mean, they had all kinds of artifacts and everything, and it was interesting. And after about an hour, I go back and I meet with this lady, and we sit down, and I said, I told her who I was and who I represented, and asked her if she knew these students, and she says, oh yeah, I remember them. And I said, do you remember an incident that happened? They couldn't remember whether it was in the spring or in the fall, but about a Bigfoot that approached your school. And she says, oh, I remember that clearly. I says, well, what happened? And she says, well, all the kids had been talking about Bigfoot, and it was Halloween. So we in the faculty decided, well, we'll put on a play for the kids. And Mr. So-and-so, our gym teacher, is a big, tall guy. He's a basketball player. And we'll dress him up in a costume, and we'll have him play the part of Bigfoot. And then we'll get the cops with blanks to come out and scare him away.
So the guy was being honest. I mean, to him, he thought it really happened.
Oh, yeah. Well, anyway, so then I
That's great.
said, okay. And I said, after this was all done, did you happen to tell the kids that this was just a play that you had put on for them? And she says, well, I don't remember that we did. And then I explained to her about a lot of the witnesses that I have that their entire lives have been changed because they've had a Bigfoot sighting, and they have a lot of paranoia and fear. Some of them about anything out in the woods or away from their homes. So I said, you have at least a couple people that I interviewed that are still carrying this with them, and they still have a lot of fear over this incident. And she says, I can kind of see where you're headed. And I said, yeah. And she says, well, what do you think that we should do about that? And I says, do you keep records of all the students that you have? Oh, yeah, we keep perfect records of everyone. We know exactly where everyone lives, and all the graduates of our school, we maintain contact with them and all that. So I says, you need to figure out who you think was on that playground at that time and contact all of those kids and tell them what you did. And I said, even after you do that, there's going to be a bunch of them that are not going to believe you. And I said, is the guy who played the Bigfoot, is he still around? Oh, yeah, he's retired, but he lives down in this other town in South Dakota. I says, well, if they won't believe you, have him give them a call and tell them what he did on that afternoon. And she said, I will do that. So I thought that was a hoax that turned out hopefully for the best, because after talking to some of those witnesses, they were still traumatized.
I'll bet.
That would have made a great...
The cops are shooting at them. The teachers are freaking out. I mean...
Yeah, and they're 6 and 7 year olds.
Yeah.
That would have made a great television episode.
Nobody tells them that it's a play.
Right, yeah.
That's not something you should just forget to mention to a couple of just a bunch of first graders.
Yeah.
I mean, that might be some stuff you want to bring up, like, oh, hey, by the way, that was a joke, kids.
Yep.
Oh,
yep.
Wow.
Gary, I want to ask you one thing. Can you tell me what your favorite of all time investigation story that you've had from here in Texas? Your favorite one that really kind of took you, kind of blew you away? I know there's probably thousands of them.
Well, not thousands. Each one of them has a little bit that makes it unique. My first one that I did was down near Thorpe Springs, and it was not one that was published by the witness requesting that not be done. That witness lived on a large ranch, and he and his father had worked for the ranch owner for practically his entire life, and they had some encounters on that ranch that he could not explain. He took me onto the ranch, and he says, if the owner or anybody comes over to us, you're just a friend of mine who lives in another town, and you just came by to say hi. And he says, if the owner knew that you were with the BFRO or investigating anything on his ranch, my dad and I could lose our jobs. So he took me around, and he showed me some pictures of footprints that he had taken down near a water hole. He had me talk with his roommate there on the ranch who had a sighting. One had run across the road on all fours in the evening, and he knew that it wasn't any domesticated animal and couldn't figure out it was too big to be a coyote or anything like that. So he told me about that one. He told me about an incident with he and his father when they were out night hunting, which I guess they can do on the ranch because this ranch is large and there's not going to be any game wardens there. But they were out night hunting, and they were walking along, and they could hear, walking along a creek, they could hear footsteps on the other side of this creek, and they were paralleling them. And every time they'd stop, the footsteps would stop. They'd start up again, and it would parallel them. And he says his dad hears this and figures there's a poacher on the land. So he yells it out across the creek, hey, if you're a poacher, you better get the hell out of here because this is private property and you'll be in trouble if I catch you. And he says, after his dad yelled, he says, there's all kinds of crashing and ground sounds like it's getting torn up and limbs are breaking, and then all of a sudden something large is heading toward them. And the normal reaction you would think would be to run away, but he says, not my dad. My dad's got the rifle, and he runs right at whatever this noise is that's coming across a creek. And he said, when that happened, he said, the thing stopped and then took off across the creek, and he says, we could hear it going, and it was moving way faster than any human could move.
Wow.
He says, I don't know what it was, but he says it moved much faster than a person, and the footprints that or the sounds that we heard from the walking really sound like it was a bipedal creature. It was not four-legged, and most of the deer around here, they would not ever come charging across this creek towards us. I mean, they'd run away.
Well, it almost sounded like a bluff charge. Once he knew that the people weren't going to run away and stand its ground, it decided to change course.
Yeah. Bluff charges I've heard a lot about. I've never encountered one, but I've heard from several witnesses, most of them other investigators who have been bluff charged. Had one investigator that was bluff charged down in southeast Texas on an expedition that I was doing down there, and she was really traumatized by it, and she was a fellow investigator.
I can imagine.
So they do occur, and they're pretty frightening from all the people that I've talked to who've had it happen to them.
Wow. Through all your research and your investigations, I was going to ask you what your personal opinion is. Some people have told me that they think it's a North American ape. Other stories I've heard where it's almost like a human, like a Cro-Magnon man or something like that. I was wondering, with all the stuff you've seen, especially all the stuff that's not even printed, for the people to read, what your personal opinion is. What do you think it is? Or do you think it's several? Because Lloyd Pye, he believes that there's, up to 4 or 5 different types, from the abominable snowman to the almas to the Sasquatch to the orang pendek. He believes that they're different species based on their climates. In other words, some in the mountains, some in the jungles, some in the desert or plains. I was seeing what you thought.
Well, until we get a sample, or find one that gets hit by a car, or somebody kills inadvertently or intentionally, I don't think that we're going to know.
Okay.
All I can really do is go by their behaviors, and from what I know, their intelligence level is way above ours in their environment. They are masters of concealment. They have nearly perfect night vision, from what I can tell. They have some other powers that some people report that humans don't have. They have a lot of advantages physically over us, and mentally they're way above us in their environment. So,
wow, yeah.
I give them all the respect in the world. I don't know. I don't see that they have any need for technology, but I wouldn't. If they did have a need, I wouldn't discount the fact that they might have the intelligence to have it. I think they understand what cameras are, what trail cams are. I've heard a lot of stories about people putting trail cams out, and in areas where they're sure that they're Bigfoots, and they never get anything on them.
Mm-hmm, I've heard that too.
Wow.
Gary, what's the best way for someone who has a sighting to get a hold of you?
Through the BFRO.
Through the BFRO, and then they'll channel it your direction?
Right.
Okay.
There's a place on the form that if they want to request me by name, they can do that. Most of the time, they're requesting Bobo off of Finding Bigfoot show, or Matt Moneymaker, or they want one of the celebrities to come investigate. but those people are pretty busy with that show, so they're probably not going to come out and investigate every request.
Well, sure. I'd rather speak with a guy like you. I mean, you've been doing it for a long time, so I'm sure you have a lot of wisdom.
The behind the scenes.
Well, yeah, I'm kind of almost a rookie compared to a lot of the other investigators. I learn something new all the time, and anybody that gets into this, when I went on my first expedition, I thought, man, I know a lot about this stuff. We'll just see what these people know. I learned more on that first expedition than I could believe was possible. Talked to people who had tremendous knowledge. They had the behaviors of Bigfoot down in areas that I didn't even know there were areas. So,
do you still go out and do other expeditions still?
Yes. Did one last fall. I have not done one this year. I had a lot of other things going on, so I haven't been out on one this year. But I plan on in 2014, hopefully, go to more than one. And I would love to do one up in the Pacific Northwest. That's kind of where it all started. There's more probably sightings up there than any other place. Although I wouldn't be surprised if we have almost as many Bigfoots in Texas as they got in Washington.
It sure seems like that. When I went to doing a lot of research the last couple of years of reading in and really looking at it, it seems like Texas has got a lot of sightings. Of course, we know we got a lot of land, so there's a lot of sightings to be put on that land.
Yeah. Another thing a lot of people don't realize is there's next to Alaska, Texas has more forest than any other state.
Yeah, there is.
Really?
I think a lot of people don't realize how much forest is in the eastern side, especially.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well,
And
I would like
thick.
thank you so much, Gary. It's been really neat chatting with you. I think the people are really going to enjoy some of your stories. And if
we'd love to have you back on,
we'd love to have
too.
you back on.
Okay, well, wait and see what you get for any of our listeners, any questions that they have. I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay. Well, do you want us to give out your email so they can email you directly, or would you rather just wait?
Yeah, you can give them my email if you like. I can't guarantee I'll answer everybody that contacts me, but that's fine.
Okay. Well, I'll put links to it on the show notes, so if people want to email you directly, they can do that. Or, like you said, they can email the BFRO and request you, especially if they have sightings in this area of Texas. So
that's what. In fact, if they have any sightings that they want to discuss, if they contact me directly, I'm just going to ask them to submit a report to the BFRO. But I'm not going to do anything outside of the BFRO process.
Well, that sounds great. Thank you again, Gary, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right.